What's up, guys? Welcome back to Man of Mischief, our Loki in review, guys. My name is Kyle. Thanks for checking out Project Potter, guys. We got our Loki hat here, our variant jacket, as you guys can see, and our Loki shirt, guys. I'm going over every episode of Loki, season 2. This is episode 2. I'm going to give my thoughts on the episode, my favorite character, which is the Born to Rule award, the least favorite character, which is the Get Help award, a score out of 10, guys, and that's pretty much it. So, guys, thanks for checking out the channel, and let's go. I was really high on episode 1, guys. I'm going to say that I'm a little lower on the second episode. Still really enjoyed it. That pie that Mobius and Loki go and get looks pretty good. The set design of Loki, man, dude, the TVA, and I love how they built like this organic, natural set, and it looks so good. And it's retro, but it's mysterious, and the music continues to be a high point in this series. But something about this episode felt a little less tight. It felt a little not quite up to snuff with what has been the entire first season and then the first episode, which I thought was magnificent. This was still a really good time, but there were just like moments in this episode that lingered a little too long, even like when they're looking at the temp pad, and I think Casey is like, hey, we found the last message, or I found out who's tracking, Renslayer or whatever. It should have cut there, and instead it cuts to Hunter B-15, who's now like in a nice like suit and tie and stuff. So it's cool that she like got promoted basically, or she's kind of running the TVA. And she's like, "Who is it?" And it's like at that line, it's a subtle thing, it's a subtle complaint, but it's like I wish that they didn't have that in there and cut it, because it would have been like a little more mysterious. So this episode lacking a little bit of that polish and a little bit of the magic and the whimsicalness of the first episode, but still very, very good. We get to see Obi again, and Obi is wonderful again. I'm just wondering, like, okay, 2 episodes in now, we haven't seen Jonathan Majors at all, which is actually very surprising. I thought we were going to start it off with him when they show up in London, but guys, oh my god, that London scene where Tom Hiddleston slowly walks, and he's just like a badass, just in control. He like unbuttons his jacket, and he's just like walking towards the camera when they're chasing after Brad Wolf, or this guy who was like, used to be part of TVA XM or something, I forget his name. But he's like making movies now, his hair's all up. They're chasing him down, and Loki is just in control, dude, and he's like got his magic unleashed, and he's duplicating himself, and he's going everywhere, and he's like, come on, fight fair. And he's like, it's not a fair fight. Tom Hiddleston is so good there, and I love when he kind of chains him up, and then the Loki horns come up there just for like effect, for Loki to show that he's like in control. And then we get that amazing scene where they bring in that, oh god, they must have had so much fun designing that machine with the little sphere. Almost looks like a little BB-8 in there, and they like bring it in, and it's got the squeaky wheels and stuff. Really, really cool. The set design of that room, the interrogation room with a holding cell where it's all orange, awesome, dude. That looked so visually pleasing. That was great. And again, the camera work is pretty great. It wasn't as good as the first episode, I think, where that felt more like a Wes Anderson film, which I mentioned in my first review. This one still looked really clean. Something was just a little off this episode. When Loki, I think he was kind of hustling Brad there, where he's like, oh, I don't know how this works. And that's after, of course, Brad gives him this big speech. And even when like Brad's laying down, and he's like sitting there, and then like the camera's upside down, and then it's like shifts to his perspective, and he like starts getting really worried when the machine comes in, and he's like, you don't know what you're doing with that. He's like, that thing could kill me. And he's like, oh, interesting. And Brad kind of eggs Loki on before that in the interrogation when Mobius ends up slapping him and loses it. He's like, oh, you're a loser. He's like, you're a villain, dude. He's like, stop trying to play the hero. And it's really interesting because Loki and Tom Hiddleston is so likable, but we forget that like a week ago, dude. I mean, he even brings up, he's like, you know what, Mobius, he's like, it's okay, you lost your cool. He's like, you know what? I was in New York, dude, and I lost my cool, and I threw Tony Stark out of a window. He's like, it's Iron Man, so it's fine, but it's really cool to like play back to those moments. But Mobius, I love how he's like, I didn't lose my cool, you lost your cool, and then he's like following down that corridor, and we think they're going to see OB because it's like the same sort of circular corridor, but it actually goes to the automat, which is just a bunch of green pies, which look really good, and they say, it's really good, isn't it? But once again, Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson shine, and they're just great together, and the characters are great. I can't believe we haven't seen Renslayer yet. Very interested to see. She might be working with He Who Remains now, or was working with him, and obviously we're going to see Jonathan Majors in like an old-timey thing. We saw that in the previews, guys. So excited, but just the fact that we haven't seen Kang yet, but there's been like heavy implication of him, and he's still this looming threat. I like that they kind of pulled back a little bit on that, but it's still like Kang is going to be the next big bad, and I really think that Disney's going to stick, and MCU is going to stick with Jonathan Majors. from what I've read, who knows, guys, but from what I've read, it seems like it's a whole lot of nothing, and Jonathan Majors is, you know, innocent until proven guilty, guys, and it seems like, from what I've read at least, I'm not an expert, he is leaning on the innocent side, but that will play itself out. But I really hope so, because he is just so good as Kang, I think, and I can't imagine anyone else being Kang. I think they said they're not going to recast him, so maybe I'm sure they've been talking to his lawyers or in contact or whatever, and I'm sure they know, hopefully one way or another, whether he's going to be okay to continue or whether it's going to look bad, and hopefully that all gets itself worked out. But man, the mystery is still like what's bringing me back, and just the performances of the characters. I mean, Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson, like I said, guys, are so great together that like there's a real friendship there, you know? When Brad Wolf is making fun of Mobius, he's picking on Loki, and you know, Mobius is getting mad, and then Loki ends up locking Mobius out. That was awesome, and he's like, it's locked, and he's like, come on, man, and the tension's building, and he puts him in that cube, and he like squeezes it down. So Loki, I think, like has mastered that machine, and he probably like was just messing with them, and it's like, that is Tom Hiddleston at peak villain. And I love how he like leans into it, but he's like, no, I'm not trying to be a hero. He's like, I am a villain. And I'm like, oh, dude, so good. But he's so likable that it's like he's like an anti-hero. But I just thought that was really, really good. And there's a lot of things I really liked in this one. But the whole Sylvie thing I thought was kind of weird. Like they go and get her in McDonald's, but then she just doesn't care anymore. And he's like, look, dude, all the Kang variants are coming. They're all going to get us. And she's like, no, I killed them. And Loki's like, I don't think you understand. This is very serious, and everything's going to be obliterated if we don't stop it. And they go back to the TVA, and there's that great scene where 100B15 is like, those are people. And it's like, man, that was such an emotional blow. But one thing I didn't like in this episode, guys, first of all, I didn't know Brad Wolf, he looks different. I didn't know that was the same dude from, I think the previous episode where they're having the meeting, and he's like, this changes everything. And then they have that very quick, like secret where he's talking to the head lady who is like apparently carrying out this plan, and she says like the warnings were correct, you know, they're trying to prune all the timelines and like I think put the sacred timeline back together. But I just felt like that whole part of the story was so rushed, where I was like, for the first like 20 minutes of the episode, I was like, who is this guy Brad Wolf? And he looks so familiar, so I was like, am I supposed to know who this is? And I was like, is it a different famous actor? He looks kind of like Ewan McGregor for a minute, and I was like, what's going on here? But then I realized that it was the same dude who had like a short haircut, and he just like kind of freaked out, and then he went to go get his life. He was hiding in the sacred timeline. That's really cool. But it's just like, I feel like there wasn't enough build up for that. He was like basically a side character of the TVA, and then all of a sudden he is like this big, like, I don't even know why they were tracking him down. I guess because he had Renslayer's tempad maybe, and then that's what they get. But then he customizes it. He said like, I put some pretty buttons on it or whatever. But I don't know. This guy was just like a dickhead, and I didn't understand, because you know Mobius gives that nice little speech where he's like, he's an asshole, so don't let him get under your skin, Loki. And then obviously he gets under Mobius' skin. And there's talk in this episode about Mobius, and Loki's like, don't you want to know what your timeline life was? And Brad is obviously like, yo, dude, the TVA is fake. You know this is fake now. He's like, what are you still doing here? He's like, you're living a lie. And I love all of that stuff. All of those questions that he brings up where it's like, dude, the TVA is kind of in a crisis mode right now. It's funny because I'm talking about this episode and I'm like, this one wasn't as good. But then when I'm talking about all the themes in here and the scenes and the different questions that are being asked, the score in my head is like maybe creeping up a little bit. There were a lot of really fun a lot of really fun elements in this episode, and I think that although it's a step down from the first one, there was a lot to like there. Sylvie saying like the TVA is rotten was interesting, but I thought that what's her name's plan, the lady, I forget her name, but the one who's like in charge of pruning all the timelines and stuff, and they have the doors going through and there's like a center console, that felt super rushed to me. I was like, this should have been a couple episodes down the line. It felt strange. It felt like just last episode that was like a side scene, and then now suddenly it's like the main thing. And I think they were killing a bunch of people by pruning those, and then it was confusing to me. It's like, are those people permanently gone? Can they not? Were they pruning them to kill? I don't know. It was confusing, and I would have liked actually a little more position there, because I was a little confused on that part. But overall, guys, I thought a really strong episode, and it's got me ready for episode 3. So I think even though it's a step down from the first one, still a very strong segment of TV there. Hey guys, Born to Rule, which is my favorite character. I will say, Brad Wolf, man, he crushed it. I mean, he was very charismatic. I don't know why he has such a crazy hair change up. Now he's obviously like a movie star, and they're talking about like Zaniac or whatever it's called, and he's like, you know, it wasn't even good or whatever. And there's that great scene with Owen Wilson and Brad, who's like, they're in McDonald's when Loki's talking to Sylvie. Man, just appreciate life. He's like, wow, wow. He's like, you know, 10 minutes ago, you know, you were making movies or whatever, but then you were in a box or something. I forget, but Owen Wilson has a great scene where he's basically like, man, isn't this crazy? And he's just like eating his apple crisp or apple pie or whatever, and he's just like, you gotta appreciate this, man. But I thought the guy who played Brad Wolf was awesome. I thought he was very, very charismatic. I thought he was like intense, and I thought he knew exactly what he was doing. And I love how he like was on the TVA before, so he had like an inside, and he's like, he knows kind of how the interrogation is going to go, and he knows what to say to get under Mobius's skin and Loki's skin. And then he's like playing tough guy, and then when Loki is like, hey, I'm going to put you in this box, and squeezes it down, he's like, okay, I'll tell you where Sylvie is. And so I love that he's not going to break, and you don't think he's going to break until Loki has to go to the extreme of almost killing him for him to finally be like, okay, and realize just how dangerous Loki is. But all of his lines where he's like, stop being the hero, man, you're a villain. And it's like, it's true. Tom Hiddleston is so likable that we forget that he is a villain. And especially at this time where he's gone through so much in Loki season 1 that it's hard not to think that he is a great guy. And again, Tom is just so charming that you're like, oh, we root for Loki because of Tom's performance and because of everything he's going through, and even the heartbreak that Loki's gone through. Even though he's done all these terrible things, like that Brad reminds us of, he's still like the fan favorite. He's still the one we root for because it's just that performance and that magicalness that Tom Hiddleston brings to the performance is great. But I love how Brad like kind of pulled that out of him, and I love how he knew how to get to under Mobius' skin too. So he knew exactly what he was doing, and I really liked kind of like almost that mole position of him knowing to get the TVA's attention and to kind of have some leverage on them until obviously Loki flipped it on with the box. But I thought he was awesome as Brad Wolf, and I thought he was a really intriguing character, and I thought he kind of carried the episode at times. So my favorite character for this one, Brad Wolf, dude, and that head hair, goddamn. You guys get help, which is my least favorite character. It's got to be the main lady in charge of pruning all the timelines or whatever. Again, seemed like a side character. I think we were introduced to her last episode. She might have been in season 1, but she was just kind of quickly introduced. And suddenly she's running this whole operation. And it's like, is she working with He Who Remains? Is she working with Renslayer? Does she know more information? What's going on? But like, I just didn't feel like there was any build-up. So this is, I think, kind of less about her character. She seemed like kind of a cookie-cutter villain, like, oh, I got to do these things. But we don't necessarily know that she's doing something bad. But again, it was a little confusing because that great scene where they're like, those are people, and the way Hunter B-15 delivered that was like really emotional, and the music playing and everyone was looking sad. I think those were like irreversible deaths or something. I don't know. This is where the whole time traveling and TVA and all the mystery of the TVA kind of gets confusing there. So I would like to watch like a recap or like an Easter egg or like an explanation of this. Thought that her character was the weakest one because I was like, who is this, you know, and why is she suddenly like in charge? It would have been like better to have that episode happen in a couple episodes later. I just felt like we didn't get enough scenes with her or Brad Wolf really, and even though his performance was so good, I was like, who is this dude, you know? And so same thing with this woman. I thought she was just like a council member or something when they had that meeting, and suddenly she's running stuff and she's like kind of doing her own operation. And I know the TVA is in shambles, so I like that part of it, but it's kind of like, it just didn't feel earned to me. So again, less about the actress, more about the character, but she is the one who gets my Get Help award for this week. That brings us to a score. I'm still going to give this an 8-9. I don't think this is quite worthy of like a high or mid 9s, but again, I was probably thinking low 8s for this one, maybe like an 8.3, 8.5. But talking about it and thinking about all the questions it brings up and thinking about the cool scenes and just how well it was shot again made me realize, okay, maybe some of these critiques that I had aren't as big as I thought, and maybe, you know, some scenes are getting you to think and, you know, different perspective on, let's not forget Loki is a villain. And again, it's very easy to forget that because of Tom's performance, but him and Mobius, they have a great chemistry. What's going on with Obi, there seems like there's a mysterious element to Obi still. I love the past-present thing. They didn't really touch on that as much. There was no time splitting, I don't think, in this episode. But I like how they said in episode 1, Kang is coming, Kang is a threat, everything's in chaos. This felt like, even though there was chaos here, it felt a little less chaotic. It felt more like, even though there's still questions and TVA is still like in crisis mode. Trying to figure out everything happening from episode 1, but then also setting up questions for the remaining episodes. Sylvie showing up with the TVA saying everyone's rotten and then leaving, I thought was really weird. And I don't know her role in the season yet so far, but I'm sure that will play itself out, but I'm still super excited. So again, another very strong episode, just not as strong, I think, as like the excellent episode of episode 1. All right, guys, that's another episode of Man of Mischief, our Loki in review. That's season 2, episode 2. So we have 4 more to go, guys. Again, it looks beautiful. The acting is incredible. The score is great. The set design is great. The questions that it's raising, I'm very intrigued at. I'm excited to see where it goes. I think probably the third episode, I think that'll probably be the strongest one yet. We'll see. I mean, that first one was so good, but I just think they're going to start to really like determine where we're going with this season, because that'll be the halfway point. But I think they got to go, okay, we'll probably see Kang for the first time next episode. I don't know, but I really hope that they're setting up. I don't think there's going to be a season 3, and I don't know if I even want a season 3. But I think they have to start setting up, like, how does this impact the MCU, the Sacred Timeline as a whole? Are we going to get a crazy cameo? I think probably season finale, we're going to get something nuts. I don't know if Robert Downey Jr. is going to show up, or Captain America, or anyone, but I think they have to, with the multiversal stuff, maybe it's Tom Holland, like, I think they have to bring someone in of extreme stature, the magnitude of an Iron Man, of a Captain America, someone we haven't seen in a while, because with Secret Wars and everything, they're kind of opening up to, like, anyone from the past can come back, and that's so cool. And I hope that they kind of build towards that, but also, like, I hope that Kang is just a force at the end of this. I think he's going to be. They're probably going to have a battle with him, and then I think the variants are going to take over, but I'm so excited. The end of season 1 was so good, and Jonathan Majors as He Who Remains was so good, and it felt like really the MCU was changing, and I just remember that being like a moment, and when I rewatched it, it was crazy when he's like, we just crossed the threshold. It felt insane. So I hope they have something like that cooked up for season 2, but either way, guys, I appreciate you. Thanks for checking out the channel. Go check out the other content, and until next time, guys. Glorious purpose.